The first time a little boy called me dad, I realized the greatest mistake of my life wasn't losing a war, it was walking away from the family I never knew I already had. Every city has a name people lower their voices to say, and in Blackridge, that name was Adrian Cross. Newspapers called him a billionaire. Business rivals called him untouchable. The people who truly understood how power worked simply called him the Alpha. On the evening of the Cross Foundation's annual Children's Charity Gala, the grand ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers while a string quartet floated through the air with polished perfection. Wealthy donors laughed over sparkling drinks, cameras flashed without pause, and every conversation carried the careful polish expected when millions of dollars and even larger reputations shared the same room. Adrian stood near the center of it all in a tailored charcoal suit, answering questions with calm precision while never quite smiling. To everyone watching, he looked exactly as he always did, composed, disciplined, impossible to read. No one noticed the quiet loneliness that had become as familiar to him as the expensive watch resting against his wrist. 6 years earlier, he had convinced himself that sacrificing one person could protect an entire empire. He had repeated that lie so many times it had almost become truth. Almost. Across the ballroom, Noah Bennett hesitated near the entrance, his fingers tightening around the hand of the 6-year-old boy beside him. He had promised himself he would never stand in the same room as Adrian Cross again, but Ethan's specialist had recommended tonight's fundraiser, saying the foundation financed one of the country's leading pediatric research programs. Noah hadn't come searching for the past. He had come searching for hope. Ethan looked around with wide silver-grey eyes that reflected every chandelier above them. "Papa," he whispered, "is this where they help kids get better?" Noah forced a gentle smile despite the weight pressing against his chest. "That's what we're here to find out." Before Noah could stop him, Ethan noticed a framed photograph displayed beside the stage. It showed Adrian accepting an award from several years earlier. The little boy studied the picture, then slowly turned toward the man standing across the ballroom. His expression shifted from curiosity to quiet certainty. "Papa," Ethan said softly, "that man looks like the one in your hidden picture." Noah's heartbeat stumbled. The photograph hidden inside his bedroom drawer had never been meant for curious little hands. Before he could answer, Ethan slipped free and hurried across the polished marble floor with the fearless determination only children possessed. Noah reached after him, but the distance disappeared too quickly. The conversations around the ballroom faded into silence as Ethan stopped directly in front of Adrian Cross, looked up without fear, and held out the worn photograph he had secretly carried in his jacket pocket. Adrian lowered his eyes, expecting another donor's child asking for an autograph. Instead, he found himself staring into silver-grey eyes that looked impossibly familiar. Ethan tilted his head, studying Adrian with innocent honesty before asking the question that brought the entire room to a standstill. "Are you my father?" The question echoed through the ballroom with a quiet innocence that somehow carried farther than the music. Every nearby conversation stopped. Crystal glasses remained suspended in midair as dozens of curious eyes shifted toward the little boy standing before Adrian Cross. Adrian did not answer immediately. He looked down at the faded photograph resting in Ethan's small hand, then back into the child's silver-grey eyes. They were not simply similar to his own. They reflected the same calm intensity he had seen every morning in his own mirror for years. Something deep inside him stirred with an unfamiliar sense of recognition that reason could not explain. Before anyone else could speak, Noah hurried across the marble floor, his face pale with alarm. "Ethan," he said gently, kneeling beside his son, "that was not a polite question." Ethan lowered his eyes for only a second before looking back at Adrian. "I am sorry, mister. I just thought maybe you knew my papa." Noah carefully took the old photograph from Ethan's hand and slipped it into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers. "We should go." Adrian's voice stopped them before they had taken more than a single step. "Wait." It was not loud, but everyone obeyed it. Noah slowly turned around, meeting Adrian's eyes for the first time in 6 long years. The room seemed to disappear. Neither of them spoke. Time had changed Noah's appearance. His hair was shorter, his features leaner, and the quiet confidence in his expression had replaced the hopeful warmth Adrian remembered. Yet there was no mistaking him. Adrian had spent years convincing himself he had forgotten that face. He had failed. Noah forced himself to remain calm. "Good evening, Mr. Cross." The formality of his voice struck Adrian harder than anger ever could. Once, Noah had spoken his name with gentle affection. Now there was only respectful distance. Ethan glanced between the two adults, sensing emotions he could not fully understand. "Papa, you really know him." Noah rested a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "A long time ago." Adrian's gaze never left Ethan. The child's posture, the thoughtful tilt of his head, even the quiet way he observed every detail before speaking reminded Adrian painfully of himself as a child. His instincts urged him to ask questions that logic insisted made no sense. Before he could speak again, the Foundation's medical director approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Bennett," she said, recognizing Noah from the registration list, "we are ready to discuss Ethan's evaluation if you have a few minutes." Adrian's attention sharpened immediately. "Evaluation?" The doctor nodded without realizing the significance of the moment. "His rare inherited heart condition qualifies him for our advanced pediatric program. We have been reviewing his family medical history all week." Noah's expression changed instantly. "Doctor," he interrupted softly, "perhaps we should discuss that somewhere private." But Adrian had already heard the one word that refused to leave his mind. "Inherited." Noah gently thanked the doctor before guiding Ethan toward a quieter hallway away from the growing crowd. Every step felt heavier than the last because he could sense Adrian following several feet behind without saying a word. Ethan reached for Noah's hand, completely unaware that one innocent question had reopened a chapter Noah had spent 6 years trying to bury. Inside a private consultation room, the doctor spread several medical reports across the table with professional calm. "First, I want you to know that Ethan has responded very well to his current treatment plan," she said warmly. "His condition is stable, and we are optimistic. However, because this is an inherited cardiac disorder, identifying biological family history could significantly improve long-term care." Noah lowered his eyes. He had prepared for this conversation many times, but never with Adrian standing silently near the window listening to every word. "I understand," Noah replied quietly. "I have provided every record I have." The doctor nodded. "You have done an incredible job raising him. Still, there are several genetic markers that usually trace through one side of the family. If additional information ever becomes available, it could help us personalize future treatment." Ethan looked up from the coloring book the nurse had given him. "Does that mean somebody else might know how to help my heart?" The doctor's smile softened. "It means more information sometimes helps doctors make better decisions." Ethan accepted the answer with the remarkable maturity that often surprised adults. He returned to coloring while Noah fought to keep his expression steady. Adrian watched the little boy carefully. Every few moments Ethan would wrinkle his forehead while concentrating, exactly the way Adrian had done throughout countless business meetings. Even the child's habit of organizing every crayon into perfectly straight rows felt painfully familiar. Coincidence no longer seemed like a satisfying explanation. When the doctor excused herself to gather additional paperwork, silence settled over the room. Noah finally turned toward Adrian. "You should not be here." Adrian answered calmly. "Perhaps. But I heard enough to know there are questions that deserve honest answers." Noah's shoulders stiffened. "Not tonight." Adrian glanced toward Ethan, lowering his voice. "Does he know anything?" Noah followed Adrian's gaze. Ethan was quietly drawing 3 figures beneath a bright blue sky. One taller figure stood alone on one side of the page while 2 smaller figures held hands together. Noah swallowed hard before answering. He knows he is loved. That has always been enough. Adrian felt an unfamiliar weight settle across his chest. For years he had measured success through contracts, influence, and carefully calculated decisions. None of those achievements prepared him for the quiet realization that another man had never tucked Ethan into bed because there had never been another man. Noah had done everything alone. Before Adrian could ask another question, Ethan looked up with an excited smile and held out the picture he had finished. "Look, Papa. I drew us." Noah smiled warmly and walked over to admire it. Adrian remained where he stood until Ethan pointed toward the empty space beside the family. "I left room for one more person," the little boy said with complete innocence. "I just do not know who belongs there yet." After the appointment ended, Noah thanked the medical staff, gathered Ethan's backpack, and quietly prepared to leave. He hoped that once the evening was over, Adrian would return to his world and allow theirs to remain untouched. Instead, Adrian walked beside them through the quiet corridor without another word, his attention lingering on every small detail Ethan revealed without realizing it. The little boy thanked every nurse by name, carefully returned the crayons he had borrowed, and reminded Noah not to forget his favorite blue sweater hanging on the back of a chair. His kindness carried a quiet confidence that felt strangely familiar. Outside the consultation wing, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights stretching across the skyline. Ethan stopped for a moment, pressing one small hand against the glass. "Papa," he asked softly, "do you think people up there ever feel lonely even when they have everything?" Noah smiled gently, brushing a loose strand of hair away from Ethan's forehead. "Sometimes the biggest houses can feel the emptiest." Adrian heard every word. He could not explain why that simple sentence settled heavily inside him. For years he had built an empire that everyone admired from the outside, yet he had returned every night to a home so quiet that even his own footsteps echoed through its halls. Ethan suddenly turned toward Adrian with innocent curiosity. "Do you have a family, Mr. Cross?" Adrian hesitated longer than he expected. Business interviews had never unsettled him. Difficult negotiations had never forced him to search for words. Yet one child's honest question left him completely unprepared. "No," he finally answered. "I have people who work with me, but I live alone." Ethan frowned thoughtfully. "That sounds sad." Noah placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We should not ask too many personal questions." "It is all right," Adrian replied quietly. "He is only being honest." Ethan smiled apologetically before reaching into his backpack. "Then maybe this will help." He carefully folded the drawing he had finished earlier and offered it to Adrian. "You can keep this one. When I feel scared, drawing makes me feel better." Adrian accepted the paper with surprising care, as though it were something far more valuable than expensive artwork hanging in his own office. 3 simple figures stood beneath a bright blue sky. Beside them remained the empty space Ethan had mentioned before. Adrian looked at it for a long moment. "Why did you leave this part blank?" Ethan shrugged. "Because maybe someday somebody will belong there. I just do not know who yet." Noah gently took Ethan's hand, knowing they had stayed far too long already. "We really have to go." Adrian watched them begin walking toward the main exit until one thought finally overcame every reason telling him to remain silent. "Noah." Noah stopped without turning around. 6 years ago, why did you disappear without saying goodbye?" The hallway became perfectly still. Noah closed his eyes for a brief moment before answering in a calm voice that carried years of quiet heartbreak. "I did say goodbye, Adrian. You simply never heard it." Noah did not wait for Adrian's response. He gently guided Ethan toward the parking garage, his heartbeat refusing to slow as memories he had locked away for years pressed against the surface once again. Ethan skipped beside him, humming softly while holding Noah's hand. "Papa, did I make Mr. Cross sad?" Noah forced a reassuring smile before unlocking the car. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups simply remember things they forgot a long time ago." Ethan climbed into the back seat, carefully fastening his own seatbelt just as Noah had taught him. "I think he looked lonely," he whispered. Noah paused before closing the door. "Maybe he is." The drive home passed quietly through tree-lined streets until the warm lights of their small bookstore and cafe appeared at the end of Maple Avenue. The little shop was nothing like the grand towers Adrian owned. It smelled of fresh coffee, old books, cinnamon pastries, and the comforting rhythm of ordinary life. Ethan hurried inside to greet Mrs. Harper, the retired schoolteacher who helped at the register a few evenings each week. Noah remained outside for another moment, staring at the dark sky before finally reaching into his jacket. His fingers closed around the old photograph Ethan had carried to the gala. The edges had become soft from years of being hidden inside a wooden box beneath his bed. That same box held 3 sealed envelopes that had never been mailed. 6 years earlier, only a few weeks after leaving Adrian, Noah had discovered he was expecting a child. He had spent an entire night writing the first letter with trembling hands. He explained everything, apologized for disappearing, and told Adrian he was going to become a father. The next morning he traveled across the city to deliver it personally. Before he reached Adrian's office, Victor Hale, Adrian's longtime advisor, intercepted him with polite professionalism that never reached his eyes. Victor accepted the envelope and assured Noah it would be delivered immediately. It never was. A week later Noah wrote another letter after hearing nothing. This time he included a copy of the doctor's report confirming the pregnancy. Again Victor appeared before Noah ever reached Adrian. His voice remained calm, but his words stayed with Noah forever. If this child is connected to Adrian Cross, he will spend his entire life surrounded by people who want something from him. Walk away now, and your son has a chance to grow up in peace. Noah had left carrying more fear than hope. Months later, after Ethan was born, Noah wrote one final letter on the night his newborn son finally fell asleep in his arms. Instead of mailing it, he placed all 3 letters inside the wooden box together with Adrian's photograph. He told himself that if Adrian truly wanted to find him, he would. He never imagined Adrian had never seen a single word. Upstairs, Ethan called from his bedroom. "Papa, can you read the space adventure book tonight?" Noah quickly wiped away the tears gathering in his eyes before answering. "Of course." Hundreds of miles away, Adrian sat alone in his penthouse, unable to focus on the report spread across his desk. Ethan's drawing rested beside his untouched coffee. His phone buzzed as his chief of staff entered with the evening schedule, but Adrian barely looked up. "Cancel tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "I need every visitor record, every archived message, and every unopened package addressed to me from 6 years ago. I have a feeling someone made a decision that was never theirs to make." The following morning, Adrian arrived at Cross Tower before sunrise, long before the city had fully awakened. His executive office overlooked miles of glass buildings and quiet streets, but for the first time in years, he ignored the skyline that had once reminded him of everything he had built. Instead, his attention remained fixed on Ethan's drawing lying neatly beside his laptop. The empty space beside the little family refused to leave his thoughts. At precisely 7 o'clock, the head of corporate archives entered carrying several storage boxes filled with old correspondence that had never been digitized. "These are all surviving records from 6 years ago," she explained. Most routine mail was destroyed according to policy, but special deliveries requiring signatures were preserved. Adrian thanked her and dismissed everyone else. Hour after hour, he sorted through contracts, invitations, handwritten notes, and sealed envelopes. None of them answered the question that had haunted him since the charity gala. Just after noon, another knock interrupted the silence. Victor Hale stepped into the office wearing the same composed expression Adrian had trusted for more than a decade. "You cancelled 3 board meetings," Victor observed. "The directors are concerned." Adrian never looked up from the documents. "I am reviewing old records." Victor smiled politely. "That seems unusually personal." Adrian finally lifted his eyes. "Did Noah Bennett ever come here after he left?" For the first time in years, Victor hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but Adrian noticed it immediately. "Not that I remember," Victor answered evenly. Adrian nodded without revealing what he was thinking. "Strange. Because I remember Noah never walked away without explaining himself." Victor adjusted his cufflinks with measured calm. People change when they are hurt. Adrian said nothing more, but the brief hesitation echoed louder than the answer itself. After Victor left, Adrian unlocked a private storage cabinet that had not been opened in years. Hidden inside was a small wooden box containing personal belongings he had never found the courage to throw away. There was an old bookstore receipt from Noah's favorite shop, a faded bookmark Noah had once forgotten inside Adrian's novel, and a single pressed maple leaf collected during an autumn afternoon neither of them had planned. Adrian sat quietly, realizing he had preserved every memory except the one conversation that mattered most. Across town, Noah unlocked the front door of Maple Pages Cafe as morning sunlight filtered through the front windows. Ethan arranged children's books on the lower shelves while happily greeting regular customers before school. Mrs. Harper laughed softly as Ethan proudly explained the difference between adventure stories and mysteries to a young customer almost his own age. Noah watched his son with quiet gratitude, believing the previous evening would slowly fade into memory. The bell above the entrance chimed. Noah looked up automatically and froze. Adrian Cross stood just inside the doorway wearing a simple navy coat instead of his usual tailored business suit. There were no security guards, no assistants, no reporters, and no display of authority. He quietly removed his gloves before speaking. "Good morning." Ethan looked up from the bookshelf, his face immediately brightening with recognition. "Mr. Cross, you found our bookstore." Adrian smiled for the first time in what felt like years. It was small, uncertain, and entirely genuine. "I was hoping you might recommend a good book." Noah stood silently behind the counter, uncertain whether to ask Adrian to leave or pretend he was simply another customer. Before he could decide, Ethan had already hurried over with the excitement only a child could show. "I know exactly which one you need," Ethan declared confidently. "If you have never been here before, adventure books are the best place to start." Adrian allowed the little boy to lead him toward the children's section without interrupting. It was the first time in years anyone had spoken to him without recognizing his reputation or expecting something in return. Ethan walked between the shelves, carefully pulling out 3 different books before examining each one with serious concentration. "This one has dragons, but the ending is a little sad. This one has treasure, but the captain lies too much. I think this one is better because everyone learns to trust each other." Adrian accepted the final book with quiet appreciation. "That sounds like a very important lesson." Ethan smiled proudly. "Mrs. Harper says good stories help people become better." Across the room, Mrs. Harper observed the scene with gentle curiosity before walking beside Noah. "He likes him," she whispered. Noah folded another stack of books without looking up. "Children are kind to everyone." Mrs. Harper smiled knowingly. "Not always. Ethan usually watches people carefully before talking this much." Noah glanced toward Adrian. The Alpha was listening with complete attention as Ethan explained why every hero needed friends instead of trying to solve every problem alone. It was such an ordinary conversation, yet Noah had never imagined seeing Adrian in a place filled with storybooks instead of boardrooms. After choosing the novel, Adrian carried it to the register. "How much do I owe you?" Noah quietly scanned the barcode. $12.95. Adrian reached for his wallet, but Ethan quickly shook his head. "Wait. Every Saturday we have a reading club. If you come back next week and tell me your favorite chapter, you get a free cookie." Adrian looked at Noah before answering. Noah expected him to politely refuse. Instead, Adrian nodded. "Then I suppose I should finish the book before next Saturday." Ethan laughed happily. "You have to promise." Adrian extended his little finger without thinking. Ethan immediately linked his own finger around it. "Promise." Noah's heart tightened at the simple gesture. Years ago Adrian would never have made such a playful promise. Somewhere between those lost years and this quiet bookstore, something inside him had begun to change. Just then the bell above the entrance rang again. A delivery driver stepped inside carrying a medium-sized parcel addressed to Noah Bennett. Noah signed for it absent-mindedly while continuing to help another customer. Ethan looked curiously at the shipping label. "Papa, somebody sent you books." Noah smiled. "We receive publisher samples all the time." After the afternoon rush slowed, Noah opened the package behind the counter. Instead of books, he found a small wooden box wrapped in plain brown paper. His expression immediately changed. The box was almost identical to the one hidden beneath his bed at home. Carefully lifting the lid, he discovered 3 yellowed envelopes resting inside. His own handwriting stared back at him from each one. His hands began to tremble. The letters he had believed were lost forever had somehow found their way back to him. Before Noah could fully understand what he was seeing, Adrian quietly stepped beside the counter. He looked at the familiar handwriting, then at Noah's stunned face, and asked only one question. "Victor kept them from me, did he not?" Noah could not answer right away. He stared at the 3 envelopes resting inside the wooden box as though they had crossed impossible distance and time to return to him. Each one still carried the careful handwriting he remembered from sleepless nights spent hoping Adrian would choose love over silence. Ethan looked curiously between the 2 adults. "Papa, are those your letters?" Noah slowly nodded. "Yes." Ethan tilted his head. "Did Mr. Cross finally get them?" Noah closed his eyes for a brief moment before quietly replying, "No. He never did." Adrian carefully picked up the first envelope without opening it. The date written in the corner stopped him cold. It had been delivered only 3 days after Noah disappeared. The second was dated 2 weeks later. The final one had been written just after Ethan was born. His hands tightened around the unopened letters. "I never saw any of these," he said softly. "I would remember." Noah searched Adrian's face, expecting excuses or carefully chosen words. Instead, all he saw was quiet disbelief that mirrored his own. Mrs. Harper gently guided the remaining customers toward the front register, sensing that the bookstore had suddenly become the setting for a conversation that had waited 6 long years. Ethan wandered toward the reading corner, settling into a beanbag chair with the adventure novel Adrian had just purchased, giving the adults more privacy than either expected from a 6-year-old. Adrian looked back at Noah. "Victor told you he would deliver them?" Noah nodded once. "Every time." Adrian lowered his eyes to the envelopes again. "Then someone decided my future without asking me." Noah let out a slow breath. "And someone decided mine as well." Silence settled between them, but it no longer carried the same bitterness. For the first time since they had met again, both men were grieving the same lost years instead of blaming each other for them. Adrian carefully opened the first letter. His eyes moved across the page before stopping halfway through. He read the same sentence again because his mind refused to accept it. Noah had written that he loved him. Noah had written that he was frightened. Noah had written that they were going to have a baby together. Adrian closed his eyes, pressing the letter gently against the wooden counter as emotion tightened his voice. He knew, he whispered, almost to himself. Victor knew from the very beginning. Noah watched him silently. There was no satisfaction in seeing Adrian's regret. Only sadness for everything Ethan had lost before he was even born. Adrian reached for the second envelope but stopped before opening it. "May I read these?" Noah looked toward Ethan, who was smiling quietly while turning another page of his book, completely unaware that his parents' lives had just changed forever. "They were always meant for you," Noah answered. Adrian swallowed hard before placing the letters back inside the box with unexpected care. "Then I owe you something much greater than an apology." Noah looked at him calmly. "You do not owe me words, Adrian." Adrian nodded slowly, understanding immediately. "I owe you 6 years." Before either of them could continue, Ethan suddenly looked up from his book with a bright smile. "Papa, Mr. Cross, you both have the same smile now. Does that mean you are finally becoming friends?" Noah looked toward Ethan and smiled with quiet affection. "Friendship takes time, sweetheart." Ethan accepted the answer with a thoughtful nod before returning to his book, completely satisfied that time could solve almost anything. Adrian watched the little boy for a long moment, realizing that Ethan had grown into someone extraordinary without ever asking for wealth, influence, or recognition. He had learned kindness because Noah had taught him kindness. He had learned patience because Noah had lived it every single day. Adrian finally looked back at Noah. "I cannot change the past." Noah answered honestly. "No. Neither of us can." Adrian slowly reached into his coat pocket and removed Ethan's drawing, the one the little boy had given him at the bookstore entrance only hours earlier. The folded paper had already become one of his most treasured possessions. He carefully placed it beside the 3 letters. "For 6 years I believed you chose to leave me. You believed I chose to abandon both of you. Someone else's decision stole those years from all 3 of us." Noah quietly nodded. The pain was real, even if the reason was not. Adrian took a slow breath before speaking the words he had carried silently. "Since the charity gala. I am sorry, Noah. Not because I was deceived, but because I was not the kind of man who made it impossible for anyone to deceive us in the first place. I should have protected what mattered most." Noah studied him carefully. Years ago, Adrian would have defended himself, explained every decision, and hidden behind responsibility. Today he accepted responsibility without asking for forgiveness. That difference mattered. Ethan closed his book and wandered back toward them with innocent curiosity. "Papa, can Mr. Cross come to reading club next Saturday?" Noah hesitated only a moment before answering. "If he still wants to come." Adrian smiled warmly. "I would not miss it." Ethan grinned. "Then you have homework. You have to finish the story before you get your cookie." Adrian laughed quietly, surprising even himself. "I promise." As the afternoon sunlight filled the bookstore, Adrian walked toward the entrance before stopping beside the front door. "There is one more thing." Noah waited silently. Adrian met his eyes with complete sincerity. "I will not ask you to trust me today. I will not ask Ethan to call me anything he is not ready to say. I will earn every conversation, every visit, and every small place in your lives one day at a time. If that takes months or years, I will still be here." Noah felt something inside him finally begin to loosen after carrying its weight alone for so long. Trust could not return in a single afternoon, but neither could hope. Hope arrived quietly, like the first warm light after a long winter. Ethan slipped his small hand into Noah's and looked up at Adrian with the same bright smile that had changed everything. "See you next Saturday, Mr. Cross." Adrian nodded gently before stepping outside. Through the bookstore window he looked back one final time. Noah was helping Ethan place books back onto the shelves, and the little boy laughed at something his papa had whispered. Adrian realized that the greatest fortune he had ever searched for had never been hidden inside bank accounts or business victories. It had been waiting inside a quiet little bookstore, beside a child who carried his eyes, an Omega, who had never stopped believing in love despite every reason to give up, and 3 letters that had finally found the person they were always meant to reach. The empty space in Ethan's drawing was no longer empty. It had simply been waiting for someone willing to earn the right to stand there.